Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into something that sounds pretty specific, right? The 2026 Greenland tariffs. But stick with me, because this single policy is a huge deal. It's where climate change, global shipping, and the whole economic relationship between the US and Europe all smash together. So, yeah, let's get into it.
Okay, so let's just get right to the heart of it. Why on earth are we talking about taxing the top of the world? I mean, Greenland, right? It's this remote, icy place, and suddenly it's at the center of this huge international trade issue. The answer, it turns out, tells us a ton about where the world is actually headed.
All right, first things first, we got to understand the main tool at play here, and that's the tariff. You've probably heard the word a million times, but how it's being used in this specific situation, well, that's what's really important.
Now, a tariff isn't a giant wall that stops trade completely. It's really more like a toll booth on a highway. It doesn't stop you from driving, but it does make the trip more expensive. And by doing that, a government can send a really clear economic message, you know? It's a way of nudging businesses, and even us, consumers, to maybe think about taking a different route. Think about it like this. If you slap a tariff on an imported car, suddenly that car made right here at home starts to look a lot more attractive price-wise, doesn't it? It's a super calculated move. It's all about influencing choices, not forcing them. It's kind of like financial diplomacy in a way.
And this is a really important point, so let's be super clear. This is not a tax on Greenland itself. Nope, it's a tariff on European goods and services that are connected to what's happening in and around Greenland. So, what's the goal? It's basically to use economic muscle to get Europe to sit down and seriously talk about the future of the region without starting a huge political fight.
Okay, so now that we know what a tariff is, let's tackle the why. And to do that, we have to zoom out a bit. Because the Arctic, it's just not what we thought it was. It's not some empty, frozen part of the world anymore. It is rapidly turning into a major hotspot for global economics and, you guessed it, strategy.
And it's all happening because of this incredible chain reaction. It starts with one thing: the ice is melting. As it melts, boom, new shipping routes open up, shortcuts across the top of the world. And guess what else? All that melting unlocks a treasure trove of natural resources that were totally unreachable before. Put it all together, and you've got a brand new gold rush, with all the big global powers scrambling for a piece of the action.
So, you've got these three huge factors, these pillars, right? The new shipping, superhighways, the massive resource potential, and of course, national security concerns. Together, they've yanked the Arctic from the sidelines of world politics and shoved it right onto center stage. This is where the rules for 21st century economics and power are literally being written as we speak.
Okay, so the stakes are obviously incredibly high. So what does Europe do? How do they respond to these US tariffs? Well, this isn't about some angry, knee-jerk reaction. Oh no, this is a very calculated game of strategic chess.
Look, Europe and the US have a deeply interconnected relationship, so Europe is being very, very careful here. They're playing it cool. For them, it's a balancing act. How do you deal with some short-term economic pain from these tariffs without wrecking the long-term diplomatic relationship? They're absolutely playing the long game here, sticking to negotiations and the way things are usually done.
And when you break it down, Europe really has two main tools in its toolbox. The first is good old-fashioned diplomacy. You know, talking, negotiating, making formal agreements. But they're not naive. They also know that economic pressure, maybe even threatening their own counter-tariffs, can be a really powerful way to make sure they're taken seriously when they get to that negotiating table.
But at the end of the day, Europe's go-to move, its default setting, is to work with its partners and through big international organizations. They much prefer handling things by the book, through official channels. Why? Because they want to make absolutely sure that this economic squabble doesn't spill over and mess up the much bigger picture of global security.
All right, let's bring this all back down to earth for a second. We've been talking about big geopolitical moves, but how does a policy about shipping lanes in the Arctic actually ripple down and affect businesses, supply chains, and, the price you and I pay for things?
It's actually a pretty simple chain of events. A policy decision gets made, and suddenly it costs U.S. companies more to bring in certain European goods. Now those companies are in a tough spot. They have a choice to make, right? They can either just eat the extra cost, which means less profit, or they can try to find a new supplier from a country that isn't being tariffed, or, and this is the big one, they can pass that extra cost along to us, the customers. And that last step, that's where we might start to feel it in our wallets.
But it's so much bigger than just what we pay at the store. A tariff like this sets off a huge reshuffling of the entire global economic deck. Suddenly, investors have to recalculate risk. Giant multinational companies might have to completely redesign their supply chains.
all to avoid getting hit by these new costs. It's truly like a global line of dominoes, and it was all tipped over by just one policy decision.
So, the big question is, where is all of this headed? It's really easy to see headlines screaming about tariffs and immediately think, trade war. But it's so important that we put these actions into the right context.
And that really is the question that grabs all the headlines, isn't it? Are we in a trade war? The phrase itself just sounds so intense, like this escalating, out-of-control economic battle. But is that really what's going on here?
Well, probably not. It's much more helpful to think of this as a form of, let's call it economic negotiation. The real point of these tariffs isn't to start an all-out war. It's to force a conversation. It's a tool, a very powerful tool, being used inside the existing system to say, hey, this is important to us and we need to talk about it. It's definitely an aggressive way to negotiate, but at its core, it's still negotiation.
And the future here is not written in stone. Not at all. Leaders and diplomats, they have a whole bunch of tools they can use to handle this. We're talking dialogue, both formal and informal. We're talking negotiation, where these tariffs could be changed or even removed. They have international agreements and strategic partnerships. All of these things are designed specifically to manage tensions like this and find a way forward, a way that doesn't involve a massive conflict.
Because when you get right down to it, these Greenland tariffs, they're really just a symptom of something so much bigger. The simple fact is, the map of our world is changing. A melting Arctic is literally redrawing trade routes, opening up new resources, and creating a whole new arena for competition. This policy, it's just one of the very first answers to a question every single nation on Earth is going to have to face. What do we do when the world we knew is no longer the same?